very stressful and very hard to manage. His expectations, the moment I was going through, and I felt a little bit of lack of empathy. It was no empathy whatsoever. It was
The way you put it, I like the way you said, to witness so much and to have gathered that wide experience, I think it's really something rather than a
balance my career and my personal life. I was not as available as I was in the past to be joining meetings after 6, 7 p.m. or being able to travel and stay a whole week offshore because I had my 4 or 5 month-year-old daughter, which I had to breastfeed her and she couldn't stay away from her mom. You're strained. I want to hear from the people what's working well, what's not working well. Normally, whenever we get to a leadership level, we put ourselves at the top.
Hello and welcome to CIO News. I am Simran Shivalkar, a journalist at CIO News and your host for today. This session is being recorded. It will be available on our website cionews.co.in, our YouTube channel CIO News, and our LinkedIn handle as well. This is an exclusive series called Women in Tech, and today we have with us Ms. Danielli Lucchesi. She is an accomplished IT leader with about 17 years of remarkable experience. I'm thrilled to take this conversation with her and also to hear some valuable insights. With her expertise in ERPs and complex ecosystems architecture across multiple industries, she has led transformative initiatives as Latin American corporate IT leader and Director of Digital Transformation in EMEA. Now serving as CIO of Service Operations Intercontinental and Latin American, Danielli continues to drive innovation and optimization in the IT ecosystems. Danielli, thank you once again for doing this with us.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks for the invite. I feel honored, and hopefully I'll be able to share some valuable insights. Thank you very much for having me, Sony.
Absolutely, and we are looking forward to hear from you. So, Danielli, a remarkable experience of 17 years in this domain. How does it feel? If you could just share with us a bit about your journey.
Yes, absolutely. It feels like ran by too fast, right? It doesn't feel like 17 years. Well, it's insane. Things have changed, and technology is evolving. And even though you may be a very good specialist on something, you have to keep up on learning, understanding the new technologies, the new trends, understanding the needs of your business, of your segments, because evolves along with the technology. So it's a never-ending story of getting up to speed and catching up. So I feel like in the past 17 years, the more you felt like you were getting some seniority and that you were dominating the space, you still had somehow to adapt and learn from the market, from your customers, from the business. So it's been a very long and interesting adventure in the past 17 years. And as you mentioned, I started off in this career mainly driving ERP. So I have a very technical background from the very beginning. So I started as a consultant, ended up being a architecture leader, mainly working with ERPs and local systems. And eventually, once I joined GE and the corporate world, I needed to start understanding and embracing a little bit of the business itself, the different platforms, the ecosystems, how the solution and the process interacts with each other. So it was not only purely domain expertise oriented to technical aspects of IT. I had to actually embrace the process, understand where were the opportunities in order to optimize the systems, in order to drive change, in order to drive efficiency. So the more and more you start to dig in, the more you realize that, oh my gosh, I really don't know that much, right? So that's when, the discovery phase and the fun part starts. You need to make sure you connect with your stakeholders. You need to make sure that from finances teams, commercial teams, operational teams. You combine all the different pieces of the puzzle in order to have a full holistic view of the business. And then eventually, once you get started on strategic roles, you do have a full visibility wing to wing, and you know exactly how to define the strategy, the roadmap, where it has to be a priority, where do you have to invest, resources, workforce, money. So I think in the past 11 to 12 years that I've been in GE, I was capable to navigate from different functional areas within IT. So I worked with ERP, then I worked with finance transformation. So basically with Hyperion, finance reporting, analytic tools. Then I started to work with the transformation, which is more towards digitalization of services and operational teams. So the teams in the field that needed to have a little bit more efficiency and productivity. And then it comes together with customer experience. So having this various experiences that I had in GE kind of drove me to a different career path from where I started.
Awesome. I'm really we to witness so much and to have gathered that wide experience. I think it's really something more than an accomplishment. And when you say 17 years and a wide experience, has this always been a part of your plan? Has this always been a dream?
Not at all. So when I grew up, I was certain that I wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to be specifically into the criminal law space. So I went to the U.S. I wanted to study abroad to actually embrace the language, and I got scholarship, and I started and I actually studied criminal justice for 6 months in U.S. But while that was happening, I managed to come visit my parents in Brazil. And my dad asked me if I was interested to build a smaller company, like an individual contributor company, to start translating some materials like user training, user guides. And I was studying. This is something I could do remotely, right? I didn't necessarily need to be here. I was an actually student in US. I needed to raise some money. So I decided to give it a shot, and why not? So me and my best friend, who was also a foreign exchange student and a Brazilian, we built a small company to start translating materials. And it ended up that these materials that we were translating on a regular basis, and we were doing that for about 6 to 7 months, was user guides from Oracle, the company Oracle. So we were translating material, and I started to see all of those elements of systems and Java and different modules and how it interacts and interfaces and tables and code IDs. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. And I was already feeling a little bit bored on the criminal justice course. It was a lot of reading and a lot of how can I say, things that was static, things that it's more around the interpretation, it's more around how you communicate. It doesn't actually get hands-on, get things done. And I started to, get a little bit aggravated. How does this work? And I started to get curious about it. So while I was in US, I took a database training, and I fell in love with it. I learned how to do a SQL, how to do a query, all of those commands. And that was something, for me, was a little bit of a disruption in the way that I felt like trying that and doing it. So that's when I decided to come back to Brazil and just try to see if I could get a job as a trainee or something while I was investing in trainings and learnings in academies. So that's how I started. And the fun fact is that my first project as a trainee was a very, very complex and large project. And when I first entered the project room, they thought I was an intern or a secretary. And then I announced myself, I introduced myself to them, and they were like, how come you're gonna be, we're training you? I mean, you are 19
Right.
years old, right? And you're a woman,
Exactly.
and we didn't know about this. So they were like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do with her? And it was a very large program, as I mentioned, and they actually tried to avoid as much as they could, investing time in me until the moment that I told them, hey, you guys are paying me here, and I was supposed to be learning and helping. But if you want to continue to pay me and I just send emails and print stuff out of the printer, that's pretty comfortable. But it will get to a period where I'm going to get bored and I'm going to try to find something else. So that's when they realized that, okay, we need to keep her busy. We need to start, providing and investing some time with her, because otherwise we do have a person here we're underestimating, or eventually we're not optimizing her time towards things that could be functional or could be benefiting us. And that's when the whole thing started. And ever since, I've been working in IT. So I never stopped. I actually got my education in IT, my post-graduation, and my master's in international business.
Look at the years that have been passed and look at the
Exactly.
things that, yeah, that have just come
Yes.
along the way. Um,
Yes.
like they say, the way, maybe it was just, this is something I think you were really meant to be doing.
Yeah.
And on those lines, now that we speak, when we talk about women in tech, when we talk about women in leadership role, there is a conversation, there's a dialogue. Not a lot of women are a part of this sector, especially when it comes to as you climb the ladder, when you go to the corporate level, when you enter the leadership space. So, is there any? I'm sure you've definitely had challenges. Anything you would like to address and share your experience maybe?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think there were several moments throughout my career that, as I just mentioned, right, you either feel underestimated, rather because you're too young, or because you're a woman, or because you're Latin, and there's a mix of things that typically comes across as a challenge. I think the most challenging period
Yes.
of my career and as a woman in technology was during my pregnancy and the first, I'll say, 2 years of maternity. And I will elaborate on that. I think it all started during my pregnancy. I had a very delicate pregnancy during the time, and 6 weeks before my daughter was born, I almost had a premature labor, and I had to stop all of the travelings and driving, and the doctor prescribed me to be working remotely. Well, I work with IT, right? And back then it was not a common practice. We know that the hybrid and the remote actually excelled during the pandemic, but back then that was the only opportunity I had to continue to work while still taking care of me and my daughter. So during that moment, 6 weeks before I actually went to labor, we started to have a very, very challenging environment with my direct manager. Either lack of trust in terms of if I would be performing as well and as much being, far away, or during periods where I had to either go to the doctor, or a doctor would come to my house. I could not join a meeting, or I couldn't immediately just respond to him, and it started to get very stressful and very hard to manage his expectations, the moment I was going through, and I felt a little bit of lack of empathy. It was no empathy whatsoever. It was already almost a miscarriage, and he was not looking at me as a human, right? Regardless if it's a man or a woman, I think health comes first, right? There's
Right.
no way you can replace your life. And regardless of your situation, I think the first thing, whenever I look at some of my contributors, some of my employees, I look at them first as humans, then second as employees, and then very last, when needed, as numbers, right? Because that makes part of the leadership role. But I felt uh, very frustrated in the past, and I had to make the tough decision, right? Whether or not I was going to continue, or if I was going to prioritize my pregnancy, my daughter, and my health. So that was the best decision I had taken in the past. So back then I was a contractor. I was not a direct employee, and I decided to leave 4 weeks a month before my daughter was born. And right after that, I left that company. My daughter was born, very healthy. Everything was going well. At the time, I actually returned to work. She was 4 months old. And of course, I was still breastfeeding the first few months while they're adapting in a child care. They do get some viruses. They get sick very often. So that was kind of a stabilization phase after I took my daughter off the bubble, which was my home, and we started to adapt. And it was really common across the board, every single customer in the 2 years before I joined GE as an employee, that somehow they felt uncomfortable with the fact that myself, Danielli, as a human, I had to balance my career and my personal life. I was not as available as I was in the past to be joining meetings after 6, 7 p.m. or being able to travel and stay a whole week offshore because I had my 4 or 5 year old daughter, which I had to breastfeed her and she couldn't stay away from her mom. So I think that was the moment where I felt that people in leadership, right? It doesn't really matter how expert you are or how senior you are. I think a manager role, a director role, a direct role that deals with people and have to manage people, you have to embrace the human side. It's not just all about the deliverables. It's not just about the goals, about the objectives. At the end of the day, none of that will be accomplished without the human piece, without the person who is performing, the person who is executing. So several times I felt stressed, I felt underestimated, I felt like I was not even a human, and I was still very young, very passionate about my career, very ambitious as well, and I didn't want that feeling to slow me down because I still felt I had a lot to accomplish. So fortunately enough, I came across GE Transportation first as a contractor, and then I ended up being insourced. They had the talent insource program back then, and they invited me to join corporate, and it's been the best decision ever. So in terms of inclusiveness and representation and leadership, GE has always provided me the best leaders, the best coaches, the best opportunities. So of course, I think we can't just generalize. It's not everywhere. It's not everyone. It's not just men. Sometimes you can encounter a woman that has a lack of humanity and empathy. But I think during that period, that had to be the most challenging part of my life, being a woman, being in technology, and still having to balance my personal and my professional life.
I can only imagine the emotional roller coaster you could have been at that point of time, and like you said, back then it was so difficult. It felt like making a harsh choice, but you had to take a call. And on those lines, do you think things are changing now? There is a shift in perspective.
It's shocking. It's very different, and we see this more and more, right? So there's lots of forums in terms of inclusion and diversity, women in technology. We're always supporting, the different affinity groups, and there's always so much support. And I think the respect that we try to propagate across, the different regions and different markets, and it's just, I feel like we have been evolving as a society, as humans, and even in a corporate level, whenever you felt like things were so straight and direct to the target and to the objective and to the numbers, I think the new leaders and the new generations of leaders, they understand and they embrace the fact that having employees that are happy, that feel valued, that feel respected, that somehow impacts directly their deliverables and therefore, the company's objectives and the company numbers. So I think that this has drastically changed from where I started. And even nowadays, 17 years ago, I was the only lady surrounded by 20, 24 guys during a project or an IT function in total. And nowadays, for example, either within my team, we have 40%, 45% women, 55% men. Within GE Healthcare, we have lots of women in leadership roles, lots of women in technology roles. So I think there's been given, right, the space. We have been pretty much proven ourselves as, intelligent and capable workforce in this industry. And I have seen a very positive trend and shift in the way that the market perceives us. So this equality and the way we've been able to conquer our territory, and that's in many other areas and careers, right? But especially in technology, I think we've been embracing to gain our territory and make women in technology succeed.
Absolutely, and what a lovely insight, especially in tech. And like you also said, we are also the women are trying to upgrade themselves, to stay on their toes, especially because this being a dynamic field, it's very fast paced. Are there any skills that you think are necessary for women?
So you can be just very curious and start doing like a self-lecture yourself, or you can just take several different courses. There are many different IT days. You can either go to and take a certification to be a project manager. You can try to have a little bit more of depth and do AI or digitalization, digital transformation. There's so many omni-channel e-commerce. There's so many things happening nowadays, and the many options that you have to serve this technology space. But definitely, I think regardless if it's women or men, whenever we're talking about a new entrant and a person that wants to evolve and grow in a technology career, you can't just be a generalist, right? You have to be very good at something, and you have to embrace the foundations. That being, as a developer, as a project manager, you have to understand the basics of IT. I think the investment of learning, I think it's the first piece of advice. And secondly, I think what it's very important to understand it's what is actually your motivation. I've seen many great people that are great individual contributors. So people who get hands dirty and they do developments and they implement stuff and they come up with disruptive solution. But whenever they actually shift to a leadership role, they fail because they're not so good with people. They're not so good at managing. They're not so good at being strategic or defining something like a, long-term strategy. So I think you have to respect yourself, understand what are the motivations, what are your strengths, and where you want to get to in order to actually, grow in the IT career. And that doesn't necessarily need to be a leadership role. You can be a very expert at something more technical, or you can actually grow and evolve in a career path, which I have done, but I've actually felt passionate about people. And I felt passionate about not only doing and getting things done, but actually planning, and understanding and talking to people and doing the Gamba and bottom-up requirement and understanding how this is going to be aggregating value. So I actually felt that was the right path for me, and that self-analysis, what was motivating me for the next step, was very important. So I think this is very important for anyone who wants to grow in IT career. Understand what are your motivations and how you see yourself in 2, 3, 5 years, respecting, your strengths and things that you manage to do very well.
Lovely. Also, since you've been in the space at a very young age, since you entered the space, also your shared experiences, and maybe that has also shaped your perception in a way. You've been driven by people and you've been passionate about leading a team and also looking after that team at a certain way. So I think that is on those lines. Any leadership principles that you would, if you could share a bit about your leadership style.
First of all, and I've been saying this in the past 8 to 10 years to all of my team members. I am not the type of leader that likes working with layers. I want to have the opportunity to talk to my direct reports and the people reporting to them and the people, the different layers. I want to hear from the intern. I want to hear from the trainee. I like having touch points with the technical contracting team. So I don't like working with layers. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I micromanage. I can't micromanage. I have such a large scope that if I micromanage, I don't do anything else. But in a way that I want to see who are the people out there in the ground making it happen. I want to hear from the people what's working well, what's not working well. Normally, whenever we get to a leadership level, we put ourselves at the top and we get blindfolded of what is happening down there. So I think that building this, elimination of layers kind of integrates the team in a way that they feel the collaboration, they feel more free to reach out to the colleague and to reach out to other people. And that environment is the environment I like working with. So I think it's of course, my principles. I don't like to work with layers, but I think the guiding principles as a leader, I like transparency. I like candor. If something is not going well, regardless if it's a conflict, internal conflict within the team, or something we lacked to, foresee or to forecast, or something, budget or timeline or requirement we didn't capture. I just want to make sure that we are always transparent and candor to each other. Second thing, respect, right? Regardless if you are a director, a manager, a coordinator, or an intern, everyone here has the same voice, has the same space. I want people to collaborate. I want them, at the end of the day, everyone has a different view of how we can troubleshoot and make solutions. And I like whenever there are opposite, feedbacks and people normally disagree to some ideas, because that way you can start, getting the best of the best people and embracing and contributing and making sure that we're capturing every single thing that is out there on the table. So I like to say the respect is basic for me. And regardless if you're in turn, we like to hear your idea, we like to hear your feedback, we like to hear how you're feeling. So I think those are the guiding principles as a leader for me. And eliminating these layers eliminates lots of things. We move faster, we collaborate, we create a fun environment. People feel valued. Oh my gosh, I'm talking to, LATAM CIO once a month. And we do have those regular, touch points eventually. And as well as eventually I also coach some of the new entrants and the new hires that we have as interns or trainees on the trainee leadership programs we have in GE. So I think that somehow makes people happier, motivated. I'm valued, I'm being heard, I'm contributing, I'm making something, I'm making an impact. I am adding value here. So I think this is basic for me. And it's been happening just so well in the past few years. I've been in GE Healthcare for 2 years and 5 months almost. And our attrition is like amazing. We had no issues with retention. Of course, eventually people were promoted. They took off to a global role, and some of the people actually embraced to go abroad. But in terms of the employee satisfaction, the way we work, the way we cooperate, this is not only recognized by the teams inside, but eventually to the overall leaders, the business, the stakeholders, to feel like we are really great partners, not only internally, but externally as well, because that's the culture we try to build. Over communicate, transparency, candor, respect, avoiding bureaucracy, avoiding layers. So I think the result of that, it's very positive, and it's just it's not a right or wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't have some sort of issues with the format and the culture I've implemented. Of course, sometimes you have to establish some boundaries, but I am pretty sure that people, they love what they do, and they have fun while doing it.
100% I agree, because it feels like this is a sort of process that you have created for your team, and I'm sure that's the reason why they are having this 100% satisfaction when they are working somewhere down the line. So I'm sure that is what also led for them, and the way you said you do not like layers, so that you also, they also feel approachable when they come up with a new idea. What a lovely sense of community that you've created. My final question to you is, any message or any thing that you would like to share to your fellow women leaders or aspiring women looking to make their mark in this space?
Yeah, maybe just a few thoughts, right? So I think the first thing I like to say and share is that we have to be vocal, right? We need to make it clear what we want, where we want to get. We need to, whenever we feel like we're not learning, we're not growing, we need to ask more. I constantly tell people from my team that I don't have the crystal ball, right? So in dental 5, we see potential. We make plans for people, but eventually my plans may not be in sync to their plans. We don't know their personal lives, their personal aspirations, the moment they're going through, as much as we try to embrace and learn. But it's very important that you be vocal, right? And you be transparent, and you make sure that you verbalize what you're looking for, where you want to get, and eventually your leader will get you there. So I think that's very important. The second thing, and especially for women, right? We need to position ourselves. I don't think we need to feel like we cannot be vocal, we cannot be heard just because we're too young, or because we're women and there are other people in a space that has more valuable insights than we do. So I think positioning yourselves, and don't be afraid, right? Ask questions, disagree if needed. If you feel confident that you're right, you sustain your position. So that's the way you stand out, right? The self-confidence somehow gets the buy-in of people, and they feel comfortable with, and they trust you that what you're saying, or what you're promoting, or what you're trying to sell, it's actually something good. And last but not least, I think building relationships is very, very important, and it goes back to the human piece that we've been talking about in the people. I think creating relationships, it's really important, and it's all around. It's your level down, your level up, and your peers. You building relationships will help you to build a circle of trust, and you help you to achieve things and think bigger, and you're going to have sponsors and people that trust you, that can talk on about you or on your behalf. And I think building relationships is extremely important, especially in the people that has interest in growing a career and leadership roles. So I'm a big fan of people. I just appreciate so much that I have encountered, and I have had so many different direct leaders or sponsors, or people that somehow contributed to the person I am, to the professional I am. So nowadays I still try to preserve as much as I can these relationships, and I think that's the beauty of the whole thing.
And I'm sure this is not just applicable to women, this is applicable to everyone.
Exactly.
Coming in from every sector. And I really want to take a moment to thank you once again for agreeing to do this with us and joining this conversation, making it inspirational yet insightful, sharing your experiences. It was an honor, and it was a pleasure to have this chat with you.
Thank you very much for having me. Every time I talk and I hear, I just feel like there's so much we can just share across the board with the people that are starting now, and our experiences. I think everything is just so valuable, and the more we can echo it and eventually motivate, inspire people, and just drive some kind of comforting word, we're all together in this journey, right? So we go through similar challenges. So I think it's important that we communicate, we share, and it was a pleasure to meet you and share this panel with you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much as well. It's been a pleasure, like I said, and I personally look forward to having more such conversations with you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, we will be concluding this meeting. Thank you once again, Daniel.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.